Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is QuestionPro's webinar, Making Sense of Synthetic Data, or at least we hope to today. This will be a look at the opportunities and pitfalls, and we'll play a fun game here. We will give a few seconds here for people to join wherever you're from, whether that you're on StreamYard, LinkedIn, or other sources. We are happy that you are here. Hopefully this is an insightful session with kind of demystifying, I will say, synthetic data a little bit and playing a fun game of true or false. So I think we can go ahead and continue here. All right. So Chris, welcome. You are always, a joy to have on these because you're so knowledgeable. And I joke that you're like the Oracle, but I really think your middle name is the Oracle, Chris. So welcome. So for those who don't know Chris, he's a well-known research industry thought leader. He's a mathematician by training, and he's worked at many enterprises as well as startups, and we're happy to have him here at QuestionPro as the global head of data science. That's what he was at Humanate. Still similar here with VP of Research Services, but I always think of him as data science, as we'll get into here, with some of the stuff that he's doing on data quality. And he's very advanced in developing new methodologies with generative AI and LLMs. He loves to geek out on it, and I don't think he'd mind me saying that at all. So, Chris, again, welcome, and we're very happy that you're here today on the webinar.
I'm very pleased to be here. This is one of my favorite subjects, as you know.
I do. All right. So first, before we get into some of the demo and diving deeper in synthetic data, we want to play a quick game of true or false with Chris. So here are the rules. You'll see, statement on the screen, and then we want to, you can vote in the chat whether you think it's true or false. Chris will talk about it, and then we'll reveal the answer based on, what we think, and obviously what Chris has seen in the market. So here we go. Without further ado, the first one. Synthetic data is often used in industries like healthcare and finance to reduce privacy risks while still enabling analysis. Is this true or false?
This is true, but with some caveats.
Okay.
And there's going to be a theme here. It can be used to actually reduce privacy risks by basically building a non-user specific model and use that as what you're doing the analysis on, and thereby not having the individuals. However, you do have to be careful, especially with things like healthcare and finance data. I think sometimes we can be, people can be a little bit unsure about, are they really removing the PII that's underlying it? And so the answer is yes, and we are seeing this being one of the main use cases. But it's not as simple as just building a model on top of healthcare data. You've got to make sure that there's no what we call leakage. Leakage is where things that a model is trained on can actually be got through prompting or through however you're using that model. And so in these particular cases, you have to make sure that that's the case.
Got it. Okay. So definitely true, but with caveats for sure. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. Well-designed synthetic data can preserve statistical patterns from real data sets without exposing individual level information. So we did have people answer from the last one, Chris. Most people said true. So okay. I think people agreed with you. How about this one? What say you for this one?
And this one is true. And in fact, this is very much what we try to achieve. And in fact, synthetic data didn't start with modern AI and LLMs. Okay, synthetic data has been around for a long time, and we've been using techniques which basically work around this, modeling the statistics underlying the data, and then replicating a new data that follows those same statistics. And that's been around for decades. I mean, literally decades. And those of you who've heard me talk before know that for statisticians, I use the expression that synthetic data is bootstrapping on steroids. And bootstrapping was a technique, a very powerful technique that we used to use to generate synthetic data effectively, to generate synthetic data sets. So, yeah, this really is fundamental, that basically what we create using synthetic data should preserve the statistics that underlie the real data sets.
All right, true. So I think people are so far agreeing with you here, Chris. So you're not facing a lot of opposition in the comments. So that's good. All right, synthetic data guarantees higher data quality than traditionally collected data.
Well, I'll be interested to see what people put in the comments on this, but I can't actually see them. But this is false. It guarantees nothing, in the sense that we can't. There's no free lunch here, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, about why does it work at all, and when does it work, and when does it not work. But the thing here, and what I will say over and over again, is anybody who's knocking on your door and saying you no longer need to collect data isn't telling the truth to you. There still needs to be traditionally collected data. Otherwise, how do these models know how to work? And you don't automatically get a higher quality just because it's synthetic. Now, there are things you can do to make sure that the synthetic maybe works around some of the quality issues of the underlying data, like looking at outliers, looking at false data, things like that. But in general, this is false. You don't, just by doing, you can't say, oh, because I've got synthetic, it must be higher quality.
Okay, that's fair. And I think everyone agreed with you in the comments too. It was all false. So we're all in agreement here. All right, another one is synthetic data is best used as a complete replacement for real human responses to save on costs. Now, I'd love to hear your response here, Chris.
Well, if I had a quarter for every time I've seen a startup that claims this, I'd probably have at least $1.25 by now. So, we are seeing that people are claiming this, okay? And to be honest, with the state of where the industry is at the moment, and the state of where it will be for the next year or two at least, this is false, or false as our
yeah, as it says there.
Yeah, I think we broke it in the process of going through it. But yes, this is a claim that some people are making. It's certainly a great claim if you're raising capital. That's what you want to tell the VC companies. It's not true. This is not what synthetic data does, and it is not what it is for. And we'll get into that in more details as we go through.
Got it. Okay, that makes a ton of sense here. The next one is synthetic data can be useful for testing surveys, models, or dashboards before real data is available. Ooh, okay.
And this one is definitely true. This one is actually a fantastic use of synthetic data. It's a low risk use of synthetic data, in the sense you're not using it for decision making, but it's really powerful. And as I've said before, the synthetic data has been around for decades. This actually was a lot of what synthetic data was used for. It would be used to create data sets with specific statistical characteristics, so you can then test your algorithms and your systems to make sure it's there, that they work in the way you would expect them to. And so synthetic data for testing can actually be an incredibly powerful way, because you're not, it's not just a random fill, which often, we would sometimes do. Instead, it has actually an underlying statistical pattern, and therefore it makes fantastic test data. It's not the only use for synthetic by any means, but it's a very solid use, which definitely recommend people use it for.
Got it. Makes sense. I think we got a few more here. Using synthetic data removes the need for ethical review or governance in research projects.
So yeah, this is do you want to advance the?
Oh yeah, sorry about that.
There we go.
Here we go. Sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, and in some ways, obviously, this is false, in the sense that actually there's a need for increased ethical review or governance, because you have an extra layer. You've got one layer which is the data itself, and then you've got the other layer for the synthetic generation of the additional data, and this is something where we need to understand that some of these models have a tendency to stereotype, have a tendency to, people use the term hallucination. I don't love that term, but, but have the tendency to maybe put things up which are what we call truthy rather than true.
Yeah, there you go.
And, this is really very core to what we need to do. And in fact, I gave a webinar last week, actually, purely on the ethical implications of synthetic data. That's something maybe we'll follow up with another one of these webinars on, because this is a whole subject to itself, and it adds an extra layer that you have to understand the ethics of.
Got it. Makes sense. All right. So now, Chris, I think you're going to dive into, does synthetic data even make sense? And you have a whole bunch of things here to discuss. So I will cede the floor to you here, sir.
Excellent. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do a little bit of background. This is background and level setting that I like to do so that people really understand what we're doing. Then I'm going to give a quick demo of an example of a simple synthetic data offering that we can show you. So give a quick demo of that. So anybody lighting candles to the demo gods should actually do so now. But basically, there's some level setting, some background, so that we understand what we're talking about. And this question, does synthetic data even make sense? It's a very hot term in the industry. Everybody's talking about it. But the question is, what does it mean, and does it make sense? And I'm going to give two answers, and people who know me will know what those two answers are. The first answer is no. Okay. And the reason I say this is that, people are going to LLMs and saying, oh, I can use this to create data, and it looks like data, and it's good. And for testing purposes, by the way, that's an excellent thing to do, what we were just talking about. But there's this incredible circular reasoning that people don't get, okay, that when you go to an LLM, you are generate data and then analyze that data. All you're doing is getting what the LLM initially told you. So you might as well not do the analysis and just ask the LLM. This is the flaw. A lot of the startups that I've talked about, where they say, oh, you never need to collect data anymore. And say, well, if you really have a model that does that, then let's not generate data. Let's just get the answers. Okay? Let's skip the survey stage. Let's skip the analysis stage. Let's skip the reporting stage and just ask. And people kind of miss this circular reasoning. that if it were true that you never had to collect any data ever again, which it isn't, but if it were true, then we wouldn't have to do any of the analysis or things at all. We would just go to the model. So that's the kind of the reductio ad absurdum of synthetic data that we have to be careful of. But of course, the longer answer, the no, is yes if. Okay, and what I mean by that, if you know how these systems work, and if you have real data to augment, then creating synthetic data is an incredibly powerful way to get more value out of the data that you have. Okay, you do have to be realistic. There are limitations, and we all want to believe that we've got a magic bullet, but the reality is, we've got to come into this in a measured way, and hopefully that'll be clear when I show some things in a little bit. But this idea that it's a yes if. So let's go through that yes if. And in order to understand the yes if, you have to understand a little bit about LLMs. Now, I'm not going to go into a technical description of how they work. That would take, a webinar series that would be a long one. But let's just take a step back and say, what's actually going on here? And for those of you in the comments, I can't actually see the comments here, but I will be looking back over them. I'd love to know if people have played with this toy before. It's probably about 20 years old now, I think, that it's been around, maybe not quite that long. But it's this magic little toy that plays 20 questions with you. And if you've ever played with one, you've probably had your mind completely blown. The way it works is you ask a question. You think of an object, so you might think of something like, I don't know, a monkey wrench. Okay, so some random thing. And then it'll ask you a bunch of 20 question-like questions, and you answer, and it gets it right. It's actually stunning how well it gets it right. Okay, it actually knows about 10,000 objects. If any of you geeks out there want to know exactly how it works inside, there is a patent associated with this, which is fascinating. It actually uses a neural net inside to actually do the guessing. But it does this phenomenal job. Now, the reason I bring this up is, think about 20 questions. If you have 20 yes-no questions, there's just over 1 million possible combinations. So theoretically, with 20 yes-no questions, you could completely identify 1 million different objects. And that's why this works so well. So let's think about that. This 20 yes-no questions can identify 1 million objects. And then let's go to the next stage of that. What if we had 33 yes-no questions? Okay, that can address 8.5 billion people. That's actually around about, at the moment, exactly the population of Earth. You only need, theoretically, 33 binary digits, 33 yes-no questions, to actually completely describe every single person on planet Earth. Okay, that kind of scaling is stunning. And, when you think, wow, 33 binary questions, I can address every person on Earth, that's a little bit mind-blowing. And then when you look at how LLMs work, one of the way underneath LLMs, what they do is they take text and images in some cases and all those kind of things, and they embed them into roughly a 1,500 dimensional space. Okay, embed. What that means is that we basically create a 1,500 dimensional vector. Okay, so think of that number 1,500. When you compare that to the 33, what it means is that the potential information density within an LLM is huge compared to the population of Earth. Okay, huge. And this idea, and the reason I put this up is just to say, this is not that crazy to think that a 1500 dimensional vector could actually describe individuals and what they do. It's not out of the realms of possibility. And this really is the core of how LLMs work. So if you're thinking, oh, it's ridiculous, I can't have an LLM actually represent an individual. Actually, mathematically, it's actually pretty, the information density is huge. And so this kind of brings us to one of the ways that you can think of LLMs. And technically, this is not exactly how they work, okay? But one of the ways to think of an LLM is something that's taken its training data and has compressed it in this way. And it's what we call a lossy retrieval method, in the sense that you don't get back exactly what you put in. So you don't get back exactly what was in the training set, which was massive. Basically, they train these things on everything that they can that is out there. But what they do is they basically train the retrieval for what we call plausibility, and plausibility means exactly what it sounds like. It means that if you got it back, you believe it. Okay, and hence the problem with LLMs, because it gives you things which look very plausible and not always true. So, but and a quick shout out to Silicon Valley, who predicted that a compression algorithm would change the world. And that's effectively what happened in Silicon Valley, and it's what we're seeing happening here. So I go through those things because understanding a little bit about what the potential information density of an LLM is, and how it works as this kind of lossy retrieval for information, and you start to see what it's doing when we go to the level of to actually create synthetic data. So, one of the things, and like I say, this is the big mistake that a lot of people make with synthetic data, because everybody's used to the chat interaction with LLMs. And by the way, that's not the only way to work with these models, but it's the way that most people are familiar with. You can say to an LLM, answer this survey, okay, and it will present a plausible answer to the survey. If any of you have ever tried that, and I have, just to make sure that it wasn't better than I thought it was going to be. And what happens is it ends up going to the mean. It ends up going to what it thinks people will understand. It gives a very plausible answer, but it's not useful data in any means, except for system tests, which we talked about earlier. And if you're using it for that, that's actually a fine thing to do. And by the way, this is what all the bots that you're trying to clear out of your survey data at the moment are doing. They're just going to the models and they're doing this. So if you think this is a good way to do it, then just let the bots run havoc over your survey and you'll get it. And obviously that's not what we want. So instead of going back, the contrast here between the two, the training data that trained the model, basically this is the lossy compression and the lossy retrieval of the compressed data is what you're getting here. What you really want to be doing, though, is saying, I actually have data. And it's data I understand, it's data I know the quality of, and I'm going to use the model to help me understand that data. But I'm using that data as my source of truth, not the training data, but the data I have collected that I understand, that I know the quality of, and I'm going to use that data to actually do various things, one of which can be to create synthetic data. And this is really one of the big shifts of the last year or two, that rather than going purely to the model, we now bring data. Some people call this BYOD, bring your own data. And this is really important. If you're just going to the model, you're not going to get good results. So what does this look like? I am going to, and hopefully all those candles have been lit,
It's going to work.
I am going to give a demo. And actually, if I can, I'm going to see if I can. No, I'm going to see if I can change what I'm sharing. And just so that people can see better. Sorry about this. Share screen. Okay. And I'm going to share, and hopefully.
Oops, I got you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, good. So this is what I wanted. I wanted to make sure that you saw my whole window here. So basically what I'm showing here is an example, and this is using our communities platform. And we have a community here, and it's called US Healthcare. It's a community of surgeons and medical providers, real people that you can see here. We've got about just under 800 people in the group. They've taken a lot of surveys between them, okay, because if this is a community product. And what we can do is we can go into that community, into the synthetic data tab, and you'll see here that there's a bunch of things we've done before. And I'm gonna start what we call a new workbook here. And let me see, I'm going to call it Oncology 5. You can see I've given this demo before. And have to give it a description, understanding oncology options, and the workbook purpose. Now, one of the things that the system here is doing is it uses those hints you give to make sure that we're not straying far from the data we have. Okay, this is key. These are, so for instance, this is a bunch of surgeons and medical providers. We don't want to be asking these people about pet care. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to stay within there, and the system will actually identify the people, the real individuals that we have real data from. And I'm going to ask it to suggest some questions. It suggested some of its own questions. Let me just say, I'll select a couple of these. And maybe I'll add a question of my own here. And the other thing I'm going to do, because this is a demo, I'm going to set this to 5. So what it's going to do is going to create 5 synthetic personas from the data we have, and go through and ask those questions. So you can see what's going on here at the moment, and this is all running in real time. You see that what's happening and is that it's created these synthetic personas. It's going through, it's running those questions against the synthetic personas. You can see it, and you see now why I reduced it down to just just 5. Obviously,
Mhm.
if you ran it for 50, you get far better information, but it would take 10 minutes, which we don't want to do in a demo like this. And it's working from real data. The real data is created, but it's asking them questions that they weren't originally asked. And that's the key thing. And basically the idea here is that you can go back to groups and you can ask them questions. And what I'd encourage people to do is think about where in the research process this happens. Okay, this is really useful if you're planning to do some further IDIs or some further in-depth understanding, or you want a quick take. Or you say, I've asked them all this. I don't have time to go back and ask them all the questions before my meeting this afternoon. And you can actually use it as part of the research workflow. And I want to emphasize that it's really part of the research workflow. Okay, we're not trying to replace running communities. In fact, we couldn't do this without having the underlying community data. And you can see it's created a good report based on that. And in fact, we can look in at the individual interviews to see what was asked and how they responded. And we can either download in PDF or Markdown. We can download the reports. So this is a really quick, valuable way to expand the use of all that data. And today we have it based on our communities. Obviously, we'll be expanding where the core data can go from. So I am now going to stop that screen and go back to my there we go. And if people can tell me when we're back.
Yep. You just got to share. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so that was the live demo. So just to recap how how this worked, basically, and basically what we have here is we have this ability to work from communities and quant survey data, which is within the communities, create these personas, and then actually generate these reports. What's here called Ask a Cohort. We're working with the product names for it. Or we can actually, what I didn't show you, you can have live persona chat with any of the individuals within the community. And, obviously, eventually the complete quant data from those. Although, just one of the things that we're working on, we're getting very good at that. However, the question is always, why not just jump to the report rather than actually run a survey? So that's the other question. So just to wrap up, just where we are. Hopefully that was an interesting demo. One of the things, the speed and cost, we've actually solved a lot of these issues about speed and cost. The actual use of the LLMs to make sure, as those of you who get your API bills know, these things aren't cheap. It might feel cheap when you use ChatGPT, but it's not cheap when you use it at scale. I think we've solved a lot of those issues. There is still the issue of representation, and that's why you may be surprised that we're making very small claims. And the reason for that is we want to stay close to the real data and make it very, very clear. Two of our mantras within the team that's working on this are: we don't steal data. There are some companies out there who are very proud of the fact that they're stealing your data. We don't do that. And the second mantra is we don't make stuff up. I mean, we don't use the word stuff. We stay close to real data, and that is really important to us. So representation, this is one of the next things we're certainly working on this to make sure that we can, give a voice to hard to reach and underrepresented groups, but not stereotype. It's very easy with LLMs to stereotype. Trust me, you go on ChatGPT, that's a stereotyping engine. It will stereotype Gen Z. It will stereotype Latinas. It will stereotype everything. If you're using that data directly from the models, you're in trouble. Okay, so just be aware of that. And then, we're only scratching the surface. I gave you a very simple example here. We're working on some far more exciting and far more in-depth models that uses that we can't quite share yet. But, we are really only scratching the surface, and we're going to be using it for a lot more. So that's all I have from my side. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Chris, there were some questions that came up, and if people have questions, put them in the comments, and we'll take as many as we can here over the next few minutes. There were some questions submitted ahead of time, Chris, and I will go through these, and you can give as long or short of an answer as you'd like. And this one's a little, I don't know, I'll ask it. How realistic is synthetic data?
And I think that everybody should be asking this all the time. If you stay close to the source data, it can be very good. I mean, most people are working in this area when we do the what we call holdout tests, where we actually don't include some data in the training and then see what it would give us. Most holdout tests we're getting 90+%.
Oh, wow.
And so in terms of that, it's very good if you're staying close to the data. And the question is what counts as close to the data, and that's why you'll notice in the demo I gave you had to give the purpose first. Because actually, it will refuse to generate synthetic data if the system thinks you're straying too far from the purpose of the data. If I'd asked that set of surgeons, like I say about healthcare, it would actually come back and say this is not an appropriate data set to begin with. So there's two parts to the answer. One is it's pretty good. We're seeing 90% plus accuracy for things that are close to the original data intent. Now we're working on that. We're working on understanding what the limits are and what the extents are. Synthetic data, the state of synthetic data at the moment, I would not be using synthetic data for high-risk decisions. Okay, that's really important. And as I emphasize, this is part of the research process. And thinking of the whole research workflow. However, it's incredibly valuable for making quick turn. Hey, we need to understand this a little bit better before we do the next phase, or in order to make sure our stakeholders understand this or whatever. It's really valuable for that. So, and this is what I keep on saying is this is what we train for. We're researchers. Okay, we know how to understand when to use data and when not to use data, and how to use the right data. And, one of the things I'd encourage all of you, you're researchers, use it in the way you've learned. You don't just throw that all away and say, oh, now we've got synthetic data, so we don't have to worry about representation or things like that. And we don't. No, that stuff is all still important. Your training is still valuable. It's just we have to shift it a little bit to some of the new capabilities.
Got it. Got it. Here's a question, Chris, that I think a lot of people are wondering, or at least have some variation of this question. And this comes from Mike. He says synthetic data is currently a black box, and customers don't understand exactly how it's produced and why it's different than made up data. How can/will transparency be improved for showing exactly how synthetic data is produced step by step?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we are seeing a lot of black box claims out there. Oh, we have a model. Don't ask where the model came from, but our model will answer your survey, or our model. And yeah, it's a problem. You'll notice in our approach, we showed every single step, and actually you can actually go back to each step to understand what it was that created the next step. I do think that there needs to be, especially in these early days when people aren't sure, not all synthetic data is the same. There's the simple stuff that I've just shown, very clear, very easy to understand each step. There's more involved synthetic data, like I say, some of the things we're working on. However, I would agree that there is an issue with black box synthetic data. So, yeah, one of the things I recommend, if you're talking to a vendor, ask them the hard questions, and if you start feeling uncomfortable about any of the steps, then you should take note of that and treat it as a red flag, maybe. So yeah, provenance. I mentioned that I gave a webinar the other day on the ethical part, and provenance is a big part of that. Where does the data come from? How is it being analyzed? How is it being incorporated into the model? Yeah, we need transparency on a lot of that, and we've tried to be transparent with that specific demo I just gave. But yes, I would say definitely ask for transparency. If you're working with a provider, ask for transparency.
Yeah, that's good. I think trust your intuition too, right? Like if you feel like something's not right, then run.
If something's too good, it's the old thing. We all know this. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And and that compounds with the idea that the LLMs are trained to be plausible. Okay, they're trained to sound like what they tell you is right. It's Stephen Colbert's truthiness. Okay, these are LLMs are truthiness engines. They will produce things that sound to you like they should be true. Okay, and you have to be able to get beyond that. And that when you think about all the high-profile mistakes that people are making with LLMs, the people submitting court briefs with a load of legal references that don't exist because it's because of the truthiness. It looks really good because those references looked perfectly laid out, and they just were completely bogus. So be careful of that. As you say, use a little bit of intuition. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. That's not to say that these systems don't do amazing things and aren't incredibly powerful. They are. But you have to go in with an understanding that there are limitations. They are built to be plausible, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're built to be true.
Got it. Makes sense. There's a couple of questions around how do you make sure you have the latest information? So how do you factor in changes in consumer behavior when building synthetic respondents? I know Diane and some others had this type of question. Is it just as simple as like making sure you keep updating your model with new information, or what do you say about that, Chris?
I mean, this is I strongly believe that what's going to happen is we will rethink how we are collecting data, but it's going to rely on having fresh, new data in. And yes, that's going to be critical. It's one of the reasons why for our first offering, we built it on top of the communities platform because that's a source of well-known fresh data for our clients. Those people who have communities with us, they have that well-known fresh data. They're regularly collecting it. They're regularly updating it. And that's the perfect platform to be building synthetic on top of. So yeah, absolutely right. This is not I've got a model that's been trained and I'll use it for the next 6 years. No, you're going to get a very limited view of the true consumer behaviors and understanding if you do that. However, if you have fresh data and it's fresh data that's related to what you want to be generating new data about, you will get a very good result. But yeah, we got to keep collecting that data.
And then I guess this is more maybe an esoteric question, but how do we get like and I'm kind of paraphrasing some of the different questions here, but first the skeptics out there around synthetic data, and if you want to use it in your research, but maybe you're getting pushback, any like arguments or points that you should bring up in terms of building up trust with that data, if that makes sense, Chris?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I was actually at a panel on AI systems at the CRC Corporate Researchers Conference in Chicago recently, and what was really interesting about that panel was people were saying over and over again, some of the biggest experts, it's like, use this appropriately for the right level of decision. Okay, use not just synthetic data, but AI generally, match the risk level of the decision to the data and the capabilities. And they gave examples of where people had, run in using AI for inappropriate decisions. There's and again, there's the famous horror stories, people using AI in airline support agents and the AI just giving things away. It's high stakes. It was an inappropriate use in a high stakes position. Now, that's not to say that we will never use these systems in high stakes position. It's just we won't just throw something together and say it looks good, let's use it. It's going to be so. The reason I say that is because the answer to the question is to use it in appropriate situations and be very transparent. So for instance, if you've got stakeholders, produce a report like the one that I've just shown, and by all means share it with stakeholders. But then if it's to do with a high stakes decision, say, and then we went out and we did further research and that confirmed that. So again, part of the workflow, not the final answer. And that's really, I think, the key thing. So I would encourage people to be definitely be exposing their stakeholders to this, but do so appropriately. Just don't say, hey, we generated this report and based on that, we're building a $3 billion plant in the middle of Nevada. You wouldn't do that, would you? Right. Some people would. Some people will go to ChatGPT and say, should I build a $3 billion plant in Nevada? No. So I really, matching the risk level to the to where we are with the data here. And this is incredibly valuable, and we're seeing people use this in very interesting ways, some ways we hadn't thought of before. But what's common with all of them is that it's really part of the broader insights and decision-making process. And we're not trying to silver bullet it and say, oh, we can just do this and we're going to make our decision to build that $3 billion plant,
Cool. Are you up for one more question, Chris?
I am.
Okay. All right. So Marcus has a very, I think, practical question here. He said, we have a community, we have many, there it is right there, we have many complete surveys. In what form does one give the model data? So what format, or how does that work, I guess? Well, maybe
So
in the weeds with it.
if this is on our platform and it's with our survey, we can, you don't have to do anything. We actually have a process which we call syncing, which actually brings it into the model in the form that the model needs to have it. And so basically, when you start with the survey, there's a button where you say, this is a community I want to use to generate synthetic data. And it takes, we say to people, it takes a day. In reality, it's an hour or so, but to actually ingest the data into the form that the model needs. So we have that syncing process. So at the moment, we're on, just so people know, we are on limited beta with some of our clients. If you would like to be one of those people, then reach out to your sales rep, your contact, and yes, we can do that. But it is part of the process. This idea of taking the community data and actually getting it into the right format for the synthetic data, but it's not something specific you have to do. The platform handles that for you.
Awesome. Great. I think that's a good way to wrap it up, Chris. Thanks, as always, for coming on and dropping your knowledge here. I think everyone was very interested. There's some more questions. I'll share them with you, Chris, and that way maybe you can go ahead and answer them, and we can submit maybe a blog post or something about that. So with that, hey, thanks, Chris, and thanks, everyone, for listening and joining us for the last hour or so. This will be recorded. Obviously, it was recorded, and we'll share the recording with you all as well. So awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.